Hi everyone, my name is Leona. I'm a PhD student at Royal University in Bochum, and I'm very happy to be able to present our long-term work on fallback authentication, which we have conducted over the last couple of years. I'm presenting this work on behalf of my great co-authors Philipp Markert, Maximilian Golla, Elizabeth Stobert, and Markus Dürmuth. Fallback authentication plays a crucial role in the security of an account. In fact, it has to be just as secure as the primary authentication mechanism because it's just another means of accessing an account. Additionally, it has to sustain much longer time periods because usually the time when you create the fallback and the time when you have to use it are much longer apart than for primary authentication mechanisms. Most likely, everyone listening to this talk has reset their password at least once. In fact, there is some research that shows a linear correlation between the time an account is owned and the likelihood that you have to reset your password. So it becomes quite clear that fallback authentication plays not only an integral part for the account security, but also the account availability, especially over longer periods of time. Fallback authentication comes in many different forms. Most prominently, probably, reset links being sent to you via email or via SMS. And there are also systems that are based on trust relations. And lastly, called personal knowledge questions, where you have to answer questions such as which street you grew up on. So to summarize, fallback authentication requires long-term memorability, and it is very important that it's reliable over long time periods. The authentication time plays a slightly less crucial role as fallback authentication is considered a task that is not occurring as often as the primary authentication. So before getting into the specifics of the study, I would like to sort of give a high-level overview of what we did. We conducted a long-term study over 1.5 years, tested the reliability of 4 different authentication schemes, and also evaluated the usability for those 4 different schemes. We also want to clarify what our study did not cover, which is first of all the security of the authentication mechanisms, as this has been covered extensively by prior research already. And we did also not look into the accessibility of the 4 different authentication schemes. Moving on to our research questions. First of all, we were interested to identify how different fallback schemes perform in terms of successful resets. Second of all, we wanted to identify how long the resets take. Lastly, we were interested in the usability. I already mentioned that before. So how exactly did we conduct our study? As the first step, participants had to register on our survey website. And at this point, unknowing to the participants, they were assigned to one of 4 fallback authentication mechanisms, which I'm going to show you specifically now. The first one was the email scheme. So participants just had a form which required them to enter an email and set a password and confirm it. In the SMS group, we additionally asked participants for their phone number, which we told them we would send a code to in case they would have to reset the password. Thirdly, we had the personal knowledge questions, which included, for example, the city of birth or the mother's maiden name. During setup, participants had to choose 3 questions and provide the answers to that, which at the time of fallback, they would have to answer 2 correctly of. Lastly, the designated trustee scheme. This one might not be familiar to everyone, so I will give a little bit more background information about it. The idea is that your social network can vouch for your credibility. So instead of you yourself proving that you are who you claim to be, your social network does it for you. In our case, we had participants provide emails from family members or friends, and in turn we sent those contacts information on how to behave in case the participant needed to reset their password. After the registration, participants performed the primary task, which was the mental rotation cognitive task. We also had participants come back after 2 weeks and perform the primary task again, just to filter out participants who will be more likely to complete our full study. After that, there was a longer break, 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months, so depending on the group the participants were assigned to. After that, we had participants return, claiming that they would just have to complete the primary task again, but instead we told them that due to some fake internal reconfigurations, they would have to reset their password and in turn use the fallback mechanism that they had set up in the beginning of the study. And after that, we provided them with a questionnaire which investigated the usability of the fallback they had just used. Okay, so let's get to the results. First, some information about our sample. We started with 201 participants in stage 1 and had 79 total completes. We also used a convenience sample consisting mostly of university students, which in turn means that our sample was relatively young, but we had about equal parts of female and male participants, as well as technical and non-technical. Let's first have a look at our research question 1, which was about the successful reset. We distinguish between the different time frames when presenting the results. So we show the results for 6, 12, and 18 months, as well as the overall total success rate. Starting off strong, we found that email had a 100% success rate, meaning there was no difference between the different time frames either. For SMS, we observed a slightly worse success rate, but also still quite high, over 90%. Those who weren't able to successfully reset the password either were out of the country and thus had temporarily a different phone number, or changed the service provider and thus did not have access to their old phone number at all anymore. Next up, the personal knowledge questions. Here we saw a lot worse success rate of only slightly more than 50%, but we did not see a specific influence of the time frame. So the success rate was already bad after 6 months, and people did not forget more of their answers after longer time frames. We also did some significance tests and found that the personal knowledge questions had a significantly worse success rate than the email and the SMS scheme, respectively. Lastly, the trustee scheme. Here we have slightly better success rate again, 80%, and we also do not have specific differences between the time frames here. However, for the trustee scheme, we observed 2 subgroups forming. The first group are the ones who correctly followed the rules of the designated trustees fallback schemes and provided actual contact information of other people. The other subgroup, which we call self, in fact provided just 3 of their own email addresses people. And comparing those, we do see quite large differences. For those who correctly used the scheme, we had a success rate of 64% only, whereas for those who used their own email addresses instead of providing contacts email addresses, we had a 94% success rate, which is almost reaching the regular email scheme. Did not see any differences between the time frames either. Okay, so let's move on to research question number 2, which was about the reset times. So what we can see right away is that email, SMS, and personal knowledge questions have quite similar reset times, which are substantially shorter than for the designated trustee scheme. Zooming in a bit, we can see that personal knowledge questions are on average the fastest at around 30 seconds, some even completed in 9 seconds. Following that, email ranged from around 30 seconds to 1 minute on average, the fastest being 12 seconds long. SMS was very similar to email, with on average 30 seconds to 1 minute, although the median skewed a little bit more towards the 1 minute than the 30 seconds. Lastly, the trustees again, they mostly range from 1.5 minutes to around 5 minutes. We again want to compare the 2 subgroups of the designated trustee schemes. As you can see at the bottom, the variation where participants used 3 of their own email addresses on average only took between 1 and 2 minutes, whereas those who actually correctly used this scheme took much longer, meaning that in terms of reset time, the designated trustee scheme, in the way it's intended to be used, definitely falls in the last place here. Finishing off with the last research questions, we now want to investigate the usability ratings the different schemes received. We used the systems usability scale, which gives points from 0 to 100, where a score of around 25 represents a system that is sort of the worst imaginable usability, and a score of 100 represents the best possible usability a system can have. Coming in at the top, the email scheme received excellent ratings, mostly between 70 and 80, which is a great score to reach for a system. Following that, the SMS scheme mostly fell into the okay or good category, with the average being good. For the personal knowledge questions, we observed that the variety of ratings was quite large. What is shown in the graph includes participants who were unsuccessful. However, we checked and there was no clear correlation between the usability rating and whether or not someone successfully reset the password. So this means that even some of those who were successful in resetting the password with the personal knowledge questions rated the system poorly. Lastly, the designated trustee scheme was mostly rated in the okay-ish category on average, although we see in the bottom whisker that the lowest ratings given overall came from the designated trustee schemes. Again, we also compared the subgroups of the trustees scheme, and here we can see that the bad ratings of the designated trustee schemes mostly stem from those who correctly used it with external contacts, and those who used their own email addresses gave slightly better rating. And with that, we already come to the end of this talk. In this table, we summarized our main findings. So going through from the top, we found that email was reliable, 100% success rate. It was fast, only took around 30 seconds, and it was perceived as very usable, much more usable than most of the other schemes. So from this perspective, email receives a good rating. Just as a disclaimer, we did not evaluate the system's security. So any rating give here only includes what we found in our study. This should not be taken as email is the best fallback system. We should definitely use email. That said, we can move on with SMS. We found that it's mostly reliable, only few of our participants had issues. It is also fast and was considered mostly usable. So in summary, it can be considered good. Next up are the personal knowledge questions. We found that they are not reliable at all. A success rate of only 50% is definitely not something you would want to have for your customer base. It was quite fast, but just because it's fast doesn't make it a good system. It was also even confirmed by our participants, whose usability rating highly depended on their specific experience. So we strongly discourage using personal knowledge questions. Lastly, the designated trustee scheme. We did see that the results for all research questions highly depended on the way the scheme was used. But if we have a look at the participants who used the scheme in a correct way, then we have to conclude that the scheme did not work at all. It was slow, the success rate was relatively low, and the usability was also rated very poorly. Additionally, we found that longer fallback times only seem to have limited influence, although we have to consider that 1.5 years is still not representative for the time that accounts are actually owned. We also think it might be a good idea to explore hybrid options. For example, instead of having people just register one email as a fallback, you could have them register multiple emails. And lastly, we cannot stress this strongly enough. Please do not use personal knowledge questions. They are not only bad from a security perspective, but they are also not reliable and rated poorly from a usability perspective. So there's really no reason to continue using them. And with that, I want to end our talk about fallback authentication. Thank you very much for your attention.